Joining us now, we have the executive editor of the American Prospect live here in the studio, the one and only David Dayen. Great to see you, sir.
Good to be here.
First time actually meeting you in person.
Exactly.
So this is an exciting moment. And in addition, he's also author of a great book called Monopolize Chain of Title. So we have a great...
Those are two books. But
two? Well, there you go.
Monopolize and
Monopolize
Chain of Title.
and Chain of Title. Okay. So now that we have all that out of the way, we have a really interesting and important story that David has been following closely. Let's go ahead and put this tweet up on the screen. So the White House is planning to waive some solar import tariffs to ensure supply while also invoking the Defense Production Act to boost domestic manufacturing. For people who haven't been following this whole debate closely, can you just give us the backstory here that ultimately led to this decision?
So pretty much all solar panel components, things like wafers and polysilicon, is made in China. And in 2012, under the Obama administration, there were what they call anti-dumping duties put on those products, basically saying that these Chinese companies working in concert with the Chinese government are throwing these solar panels on the world market at extremely low prices, below cost, in order to dominate the market. And so in 2012, they put these restrictions on. Almost immediately, the solar imports from China went down almost at the same rate as the solar imports from 4 Southeast Asian companies went up.
And so,
it's not, you don't have to be a genius to figure out that these goods were being transshipped from China to these 4 Southeast Asian countries and then on to all over the world, but including the United States.
Right.
So about 3 or 4 months ago, a small solar company here in the United States, a domestic manufacturer of these panels called Oxen Solar, filed what is known as an anti-circumvention order, seeking an investigation. It's a quasi-legal process. The Commerce Department is obligated to check it out, and they are in the midst of doing so. And basically, they're looking into whether or not these goods are being indeed transshipped from these 4 Southeast Asian companies to the U.S., therefore circumventing the tariff that was put on the Chinese companies. So they're in the midst of this investigation, and the domestic solar installers are freaking out about it because they like cheap solar panel goods from Asia.
Who doesn't? Yeah.
and you know, I mean, there's an argument for it, right? I mean, we need to build out the green transition, and you know, if you can do it more cheaply, then more power to you. There are larger questions of the reliability of centralizing production in essentially one part of the world. It also is the case that these goods happen to be made using dirty coal in the production. It's very production intensive, very energy intensive, and so it offsets some of the benefit. And it's also made largely in the Xinjiang region, which we know is using largely forced labor from the Uyghurs to do this. In fact, there's a law called the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, which is about to go into force, that prevents the bringing in of any goods from this region that are made with forced labor.
Right, and so just to understand, I think, because Biden is trying to kind of have it both ways here. He's saying, I'm going to use the Defense Production Act to increase U.S. manufacturing, but I'm also in the interim going to waive all of these tariffs.
Right.
So the marketplace, how is it supposed to compete, especially when you have the actual person who sued on this behalf, the California-based Oxen Solar Company, who asked the Commerce investigation to trigger this? He is saying, he's like, you're interfering in this process, which was quasi-judicial, and you're actually hurting our ability to develop any competitive edge in U.S. manufacturing if you do believe in solar. So, I mean, this does seem like a gift to these domestic installers and, frankly, to these Chinese companies.
Yeah, I think that's right. And, you know, the trade organization that represents them are one and the same. The trade organization, the Solar Energy Industries Association, includes a lot of installers, but it also includes manufacturing companies like the Chinese companies who are subjects of this investigation.
Yes.
Like Jinko Solar and Trina Solar and JA Solar. So, basically what Biden did is he said, okay, we are for 24 months going to suspend any of these anti-dumping tariffs They're actually called duties.
Yes, right.
The trade lawyers get very mad at me when I call them tariffs. So they're going to suspend them for 24 months, for basically 2 years, give them a free pass. And yes, I mean, it's hard to see how using the Defense Production Act to boost domestic solar manufacturing is going to work when you have a much cheaper product over in China. The authority for how Biden is suspending these anti-dumping and countervailing duties is very strange. It's from the Smoot-Hawley tariff. It's from the 1930 Trade Act. And it's supposed, the authority that he's using is supposed to be used in the event of like a natural disaster. It's supposed to be used for earthquakes. And it's supposed to suspend tariffs to bring in necessary goods in the event of some sort of physical emergency. So it's very hard for me to see, and it's very hard for a lot of trade lawyers I talked to yesterday to see how this authority is kosher. But there's little belief that anyone's going to challenge it. Maybe Oxen Solar, or maybe one of these domestic solar companies will challenge it in court and we'll get a final ruling. But what the trade lawyers I talked to are worried about is that this doesn't just affect solar. It means that any kind of small company that wants to investigate an anti-dumping case that the government doesn't like, the government has now pulled a rabbit out of its hat, and this special exemption that they can put in place to basically facilitate the continued, whatever it is they want out of a trade regime.
That's terrible.
So it's not just bad for solar domestic manufacturing, it's bad for a number of points of domestic manufacturing as long as your lobby is big enough to make it a political problem.
What do the political lines look like on this debate?
Well, I mean, it's a little, skewed. I mean, you have environmentalists who do say, yes, we need to build out solar, and we need to do it as cheaply and quickly as possible. You have folks on the trade side in both parties, economic sort of nationalism types, who say that we need to build a domestic solar industry, not just because of where this is coming from, but because it's the law. Like our trade laws are supposed to protect and assist domestic industry and build good jobs in this country. And if we can't do that because there are workarounds or ways that the government can stop these kinds of investigations, then that could be bad for all of us from an economic standpoint. And the other point to make is that we just lived through a pandemic where we saw the dangers of long intermediated supply chains. We saw the dangers of centralizing production in one part of the world, and when that production goes south, then we have a shortage in this country. And we could certainly see that with solar. This also is sort of a dry run. As I mentioned, this Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act is supposed to come in place at the end of the month. And are they going to figure out some other way to exclude that? And this is something that passed, I believe, 420 to 1.
Yeah, it was
in the
unanimous
House,
through the
and
Senate.
by voice vote in the Senate.
Right.
And we're just going to overturn this law because it's inconvenient for solar installers who want cheap solar panels?
I think this is an excellent point, because they have just given a gift to National Retail Foundation, to Nike, to all these people. You think their supply chains don't touch They lobbied heavily against the Uyghur Protection Act, specifically because they know their supply chain is riddled with this type of labor. And now you have shown that if you can make a good enough argument, you can get a waiver from the administration. I mean, my question is, David, is the investigation going to continue? Like, are we actually going to find out the results? And I mean, it's probably very demoralizing to the CBP officers who are even leading this investigation, because they're like, well, what's the point? What am I doing here?
It's the Commerce Department officers.
Right.
But yes, it is supposed to continue, and they're supposed to do it on a parallel track. And I think the end result, if you sort of, let's take what is the best argument the Biden administration can make. We're going to do this on a parallel track. The end result will be, if they do find circumvention, then they will put the duty on, which is probably no more than between 12 and 20%.
Yeah, right.
And in 2 years, those companies will have to pay that duty. So maybe in 2 years, it becomes a little less cost effective for solar to be imported from these Southeast Asian countries. But 2 years is a long time, and certainly if the Chinese government is determined enough to dominate this market, they don't really care about profit. They can continue to drop this down such that the duty is irrelevant. So I think that this, your characterization of this as a gift is pretty accurate.
What would a sensible industrial policy look like to encourage the domestic manufacturing of solar panels?
Well, I mean, I think it starts with boosting support here in the United States. We've always had support on installation, but we've never had support on production. So a production tax credit, John Ossoff has that bill. It was at one point part of the artist known formerly as Build Back Better. There's still a chance that in whatever newfangled process that they put together that that would come through. But I think that's the important thing, that we've never actually incentivized solar production in the United States. Now, some solar producers say, well, we just have to do it this way. It's always going to be cheaper in China, and it's a fool's errand to say that we can produce it more cheaply in the United States. And that gets into some real kind of creepy moral arguments that, like, yeah, we have to have this slavery out there because and use this forced labor because it's just cheaper for us, which is the kind of arguments that you heard, in the 19th century.
Yeah, and let's accept also let's accept this, which is that why it's cheaper there? Because they don't have environmental regulations that we have here. They can take little kids and make them breathe in toxic fumes, use dirty coal, and pollute the environment while they're producing clean energy so you can hit your... If we do it here, we have actual regulations which we have to abide by. Yes, that might be more expensive, but that's better overall for the environment.
And if the point is, if you want to support all workers,
of course,
you would allow this regime that says we're not going to tolerate the widespread mass use of forced labor in this other country. I mean, I've heard, yesterday I heard like solar boosters who I was fighting with online talk about like, well, we use prison labor here in the United States. It's
That's
like
bad too.
It's the ultimate two wrongs don't make a right. Kind of argument.
Great point. Lastly, I wanted you to plug your latest reporting, which is on one of the things that you all do so well is pointing out, hey, here are things Biden could actually do. You all had I think you called it the day one agenda. You had a list of executive actions he could take, doesn't need Joe Manchin, the parliamentarian, the filibuster, all that off the table. You have another of those items that would allow Joe Biden to go after the for-profit college industry, which has been just disgustingly exploitative and abusive of students. Take us through that.
And has been so for like 80 years. When I did the reporting on this, since the GI Bill came out after World War II, there have been unscrupulous for-profit colleges that pop up like clockwork every decade to try to grab that federal money. The key point here is that the way in which the for-profit college industry survives is through federal loans, federal financing. Almost 90% of all money that is revenue to the for-profit industry comes from federal student loans. So if you deny those colleges the access to the federal student loan program, they can't survive. And what we saw, there are kind of two ways to handle this. The first way is what we saw last week. So the Biden administration, to their credit, canceled every single loan that was made for Corinthian colleges, this for-profit network, this very predatory network, for its entire history, from 1995 to 2015, canceled all of them, and will refund payments. So you can do that on the back end. You've already financed it. The executives got their money. They went away scot-free. They had no accountability. And we will, pay back and give restitution to the victims, the people who went to these colleges, who got worthless diplomas, and it's very costly. Or on the front end, you could prevent for-profit colleges in the first place. Do not allow people to get rich off of federal financing and exploiting students, and not have that as an option. Now, I assume the for-profit college industry would say, well, what about these poor kids? These, they have nowhere else to turn. They want to better themselves and make a better education. the for-profit college industry is not a way to do that. I mean, they not only do they not help people's career prospects, in some cases I've heard that they actively hurt it, that they go into job interviews and it says Corinthian colleges on it and the job recruiters laugh at them. So this is not a case where we have to be unscrupulous and exploit a little bit because it's necessary. I mean, first of all, that's a bogus case to begin with, but it's really bogus in the extent of the for-profit college industry. So what I reported on today is the fact that the Debt Collective, which is an activist group, sent a letter, a memo, to the Education Department last July outlining the steps that can be taken, and all the steps are in the story, of how you can dismantle the for-profit college industry without needing Congress. You can just deny recertification, access to the student loan program. The Education Department has the ability to do it. They could do it today. They could just deny access to the for-profit college industry.
Wow.
Sounds like a very good idea. And, I think it's just important for people to still sort of exercise their political imagination and understand that, yes, the President of the United States does, in fact, still have power. He's not a magician, he can't do everything, but he does, in fact, have some power in and of himself. David, great to see you. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Great to see you, man.
Thanks
Always
for having
love
me.
talking
Our
to you.
pleasure.
Thank you guys so much for watching. We really appreciate it. It's our actual 1-year anniversary since we actually began, which is kind of incredible. So thank you all so much for showing up. We got
Also,
big
my
plans.
son's 9th birthday.
Yes.
Happy birthday,
Happy
Lolo.
birthday, Lolo. I remember that from 8th birthday from last year. So it's time truly flies. We got big announcements on the horizon. We'll have some on Thursday. And that's, I guess, when we'll see you. We got great partner content in the interim. And yeah, all right, we'll see you then.
Love you guys. See you soon. Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.